Welcome back to Embrace the Squiggle, everyone. I am Colleen, and today you are getting just me. Ashley, as you've all heard, has started a new job as a president of an IT company, and she is working nonstop right now. So, because we all know that great leaders eat lunch, and I need Ashley to actually get a break, I am doing solo this week. And I am excited to have my friend Allison be joining me today. So, we were just talking before this because right before we were hopping on, I said to Allison, like, how did we meet again? Because I feel like it was you were not in my life, and then you're in my life in so many ways. So, we jumped in and realized that Cuckoo, who was on the podcast in our very first season early on, who had pitched herself to me to be on the podcast, is somebody who Allison knows. And so then we realized we had all these kind of woven things in common. And now Allison's one of the folks that I'm, pulling in to do some coaching for my business too. So welcome, Allison. Excited to have you today.
Yeah, thanks, Colleen. It was really exciting to have this opportunity to come talk to you today.
All right. So let's start with little Allison. What did little Allison think she was going to be when she grew up?
Yeah, so little Allison thought she was going to be a marine biologist. So I feel like that might have been common, but I loved, kind of like animals, the ocean, all of that. And that's what I thought I was going to end up doing.
It that's definitely a common, I think, idea, particularly for kids who've grown up on the coast.
Yeah.
And so, right, kids who, you've been to, I think of, I took my daughter to Mystic Aquarium when she was, I don't know, 5 or 6. She was little, maybe preschool age, kindergarten. And when we got home that night, she started drawing in her notebook. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Oh, I know my next career." And I said, "Great. What are you going to," or my career, probably not
Yeah.
next. I was thinking next at that point. And she said, "I'm going to design clothing for sea lions."
Oh, I love
And I was
that.
like, "Oh, okay." Like, didn't know this was a career out there. But in her mind, dogs had t-shirts, like people dressed their dogs up. And these sea lions had these ugly black straps on them that they would put on for them to go dive in with cameras on. So they were sea lions that had been trained by the Navy SEALs
Oh,
to
wow.
they had like cameras they'd attach them so they could go underwater and see things. And she was like, they just need something prettier. So she decided she was going to design better straps and t-shirts for the sea lions.
I love that.
Right? So she was like, "I'm gonna take this and my creativity and go." But I feel like marine biologist, yeah, took it to a different level than my child who was gonna design clothes for the sea lions, but
Yeah, I mean, both probably are needed. So,
absolutely. She's not designing clothes for sea lions now, fun fact, because just like you, she squiggled to something different probably by the time she was 7. But there was that brief period where designing clothes for sea lions, I loved it. She had a little notebook that she sketched all these ideas out for. So she was ahead of her time. Someday sea lions are gonna be wearing clothes, and it's gonna
yep.
all be because of her. All right, so that is not what you do,
Yeah.
and, um, so let's go to when you were kind of finishing your education,
Yeah.
right? Like, finishing high school or going off to college. Like, during those years, what were you thinking was gonna be the next thing or the
Yeah,
thing
so
you did?
when I was going to college, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I ended up really liking psychology. It was just really the study of people. So, and everyone said, well, psychology you can do almost anything with. As I got into it a little bit more, I realized I liked business. And when I spoke with my father, he had said, human resources is really a field that women tend to do well in for business. So I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, a lot of interviewing, all of that. So I ended up talking my way into a few classes in the business school at UMass. If some people don't know, you really have to get certain grades, all at certain classes to be able to get into the business program. But I really just wanted to take the human resources courses and the compensation. So I went to the professor, I spoke with her, and I was able to get into those classes, which led to an intern.
Negotiating from day 1, right?
Oh, yes.
So
Yes. That's definitely something I've probably had that thread throughout my life. And I really enjoyed it. Just kind of that interviewing side of it and getting to know like why people are getting into the jobs they want to. So that was the beginning steps of kind of jumping into the human resources field.
and so you did that for up until, I don't know, a couple of years ago, that, like,
Yeah.
HR was really your pathway.
Yeah, it was definitely like a thread throughout it. Like I ended up working in like the healthcare side. I was HR generalist and recruiter, all of that fun stuff. My pivot or my swiggle ended up coming when I was working in like a healthcare HR group. It was a large company. Things tended to not move super fast in that atmosphere of healthcare, and I ended up being looking for something new. And I found it was a role that was posted on. It was an HR website, Nira, which is the Northeast Human Resources, but it was for a
Mhm.
startup, and they were selling HR software to hospitals. And I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. So I ended up moving into what I was account manager. So I ended up moving into a startup as like the 40th employee and stayed there for a really long time. I was there for like 11 years, which I know nowadays sounds that doesn't happen.
Super
Um,
long, and so especially for a startup, right? Often, like,
yeah.
startups don't always make it, so the fact that
Yeah.
it made it and that you stayed there
Yeah.
for 11 years.
And every like 2 to 3 years, I would get a new job within that startup. So it was like moving teams, it was working on different products. I worked on their performance management product, so online appraisals. So it really aligned to my HR skills. And I was teaching HR professionals how to use the software and how to train their staff. So it kind of took a lot of the stuff I had learned in college or in working in the HR field, but now I was on the other side working with clients.
And that's a pivot I hear from a lot of our clients that I've worked with through the years, and I'm sure you've seen it too, right? Where people work in one field,
Yep.
and then when they're trying to make that leap, it's it's not as big of a leap,
Yeah.
right? So worked with a lot of folks who work in higher ed and then they go work for higher ed software or higher
Yeah.
ed consulting, right? So you can take this thing that you've done and pivot it into a new industry, but really the same field. So,
Exactly, and you have that trust as well, which ends up coming because 'cause I'm like, "Hey, I used to be in your seat." Like, I was like this, and then fun fact was we used to hire some of our clients to come on board for our software company too, so
mhm,
it kinda worked both ways. We found the people that we thought would be a good niche.
nice. Um, and then eventually that wasn't working anymore.
Yeah, so continued more in that like tech type field, all of that. And then after I worked more in like a sales role. For a while I ran an account management team. And at that point I was like, you know what? I have worked in all of these different like startups, had to pivot, all of this. And I was like, what if I do this on my own? And so I decided to take that leap and become a certified career coach. And it really pulled in all of the different things I loved where I'm speaking with clients. I'm that person who always wants to talk about your job. So when you tell me, I was that friend that people would come to, they're like, can you look at my resume? Can you do this? Like, how do I interview? So I was like, wait a minute, what if I actually did this on a broader scale? So that's how I made that pivot a little over a year ago into having my own career coaching business.
Nice, congratulations.
Thank you.
And so you actually bring up something right there that you mentioned that I had a conversation with a client yesterday, a client who started their own business. And so I've been kind of working with her to figure out how to make her business profitable, how to get it
Mhm.
all set up. And one of the roads we went down was how many people, once you start a business, and I don't want to say this is only women because I think it happens to men too, but I think as women, this happens more, and maybe it's just because most of the women I hang out with are very relationship-based women,
Yep.
that you start getting all those people who ask, right? You get the family members, you get the friends, "Can you look at my resume? Can you do this?" And all of a sudden, you realize at the end of the week, or, "Can I pick your brain?"
Yes.
Right? The whole "Can I pick your brain?" And I know I've had weeks where I'm like, "You know what? I've had 2 calls a day of people picking my brain." I've had
Hmm.
2 calls a day where it's friends from high school, a friend from college, a cousin
Yep.
who are asking me to take a look at their resume, and all of a sudden you're realizing, "Wow, that was 10 hours this week that I've
Right.
spent
Hmm.
doing this work." And this other client and I were having this conversation because they were starting to get there. And a
Yep.
lot of it were companies that she's worked with
Mhm.
whose staff would pick up the phone and say, "Can I just pick your brain on this?" And balancing out this is my business. I'm an expert. I need to make money. And
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but being nice,
Correct. Yeah, I would agree with that.
and I lean into, a woman who I met when my daughter was young, like our daughters went to school together, and she went back to school to be a lactation consultant.
Mhm.
And Rachel got really good at this. Like she became like a baby whisperer, right? Like she was so good at this. And all of a sudden, person after person would reach out to her and say, "Hey, you switched careers. You became a lactation consultant. How'd you do it? How'd you build your business? How do you get um insurance to pay for it?" Like all of those things. And so on her website was buy me a cup of coffee and you can pick my brain. So at the beginning it was buy me a Starbucks. You could get her a Starbucks gift card, $5, $10. And then she realized like this became more and more common. She was spending so many hours doing this. And finally she was like, pick my brain, $97 for a half hour, right? Here's my link. Um, and I think it's a hard move for a lot of folks to make
I agree.
because we try to be nice, but
Yeah.
again, it's your business and your
Mhm.
expertise, and so I've been working harder myself that when people ask, "Can I pick your brain?" that I'll send them my Calendly link,
Yep.
where they can click on the Calendly link, they can pay for the half-hour session right then and there, but I'm wondering how like, have you had to deal with that? Have you started to deal with that?
Yeah.
Um as somebody who runs their own business, you just can't give it all away for free.
100%. Yeah, so I definitely run into it. Where I am my business right now, what I think the best thing for me is building credibility, right? So making
Mhm,
sure that I have reviews out there, that I have testimonials for my clients. So what I've been doing is and getting referrals. So a lot of my business comes directly through referrals. So what I tend to do is if I talk to a friend, even if it's a close friend, and give them some advice, I'll ask them, I'll be like, would you mind writing me a review or being a testimonial? And 9 times out of 10, they will, right? Because they want to help too as well.
mhm.
Or I will say, do you know someone else? Or just share my information if there's somebody else that you know that I could help. Here's some of my sessions, all of this. So I think that has been helping me now as I build up. To your point, as I scale up further, I might not have the as much time to do this. So I probably am going to have to pivot and be a little bit more I don't want to say stricter, but just more strategic on how I do it. But right now, that's kind of my ask for them. Like, can you help me in this way? So there's more visibility.
I love that. That's a great way to approach it. And the other thing, for folks who are listening to this, if you're starting to ask friends and family members who run a business for their advice, think about how are you paying them,
Yeah.
right? Just, how are you paying them? Because the other piece that I've been going out there in the world is my whole great leaders eat lunch movement. And really, it's about not just eating lunch, but about that not working so hard that you're burning yourself out. And I can't tell you how many times I've taken calls at 8 o'clock at night for a friend or, worked on that and done those extra things for folks and then realized, I'm burning myself out because I'm doing it. So,
Yeah, I've been there too as well. So the
right.
boundaries help for it.
Yeah, and if you're someone who struggles with putting those boundaries out there, no, it's not you being mean, it's not you wanting to help. I've had clients come to me and tell me they've paid $2,000 for a resume, right? And okay, right, one, I think it's absolutely ridiculous.
I agree.
I mean, I get that there are skills here. I've been writing resumes for people for decades.
Mhm.
Um, There's no amount that $2,000, I don't care what a resume writer's doing for you, it is
Yeah,
not worth $2,000,
I would agree with that.
right? Like, to me, that's a whole coaching package. Like,
Yeah,
I'm gonna help you figure out how you're getting a job for that amount, not just
100%.
writing your resume.
Yep.
So, if you're out there and thinking about this, please don't pay someone $2,000 to do your resume. I don't care how high level you are, that is not worth it. So, I wanted to jump in today because let's start talking about the things job seekers are getting wrong these days as we pivot, right? What are the things that because it's not easy to get a job right now. It is a competitive environment. I've heard HR people, particularly with things like LinkedIn, right? The easy apply button on LinkedIn, fantastic. People are getting lots of applications. It also means there could be getting thousands of applications, particularly if it's a remote job,
Yep, I agree.
right? Put remote in your title, and it doesn't matter what people are qualified for. They're like, oh, I want a remote job. Click, 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 click. So, with this level of competition,
Yeah.
let's talk about the whole process of how people are applying for a job from right how you get a job from beginning to end and where some
Yeah.
things are going wrong. So, first step is finding the jobs and applying for them. What are you seeing out there that's working
Yeah.
for people? And what are things that you're seeing out there that you're like, oh, here are some of the things that
Yeah.
people are really getting wrong these days?
Yeah, I would say some of the things that are working for people is looking for some of those like niche websites. So, not just relying on Indeed or LinkedIn. So, there's depending on what industry that you're in. So, one website, I've worked with a lot of people with my background in startups. So, there's a great website that a lot of these jobs are not listed on LinkedIn. It's called Well Found. So I've had some good success with clients looking directly there. So it's a lot of those like smaller tech jobs, whether it's engineering or customer success, those jobs are on there. So I think it's looking outside of that. The other thing I would say is yes, it's great to apply online, but you know what's better? Talking to your friends, talking to colleagues, people in your life, and telling them that you're looking for a job because that word of mouth is going to help too. In addition to applying for jobs, you really should be telling your network that you are looking for this next role in this next industry. I think that's really important, especially with the way the market is currently.
I love all of that advice. When people are looking at those more niche websites, like those smaller websites, now you're talking companies might be getting tens of applicants and not
Yeah,
hundreds or thousands. So your pool has just gotten a lot smaller.
exactly.
And you they're just being more you're being more strategic there.
Hmm.
And as you say, the idea about well found, right,
Yeah,
for startups, almost every industry has some of those job boards.
exactly.
I'm currently working with someone who's an actuary, and we were talking, and they said they were involved in I forget what it's called, but we'll call it the American Association of Actuaries for whatever, right? For the National Actuary Association. And I said, one, reach out to the membership person there to say you're
Yeah.
looking to pivot from this area of actuary to that area. Could they recommend a few people for you to talk to? Because the membership person knows people.
Hmm.
And then he said, "Oh, I wonder how I do that." So as I pull up the website, it ends up this association posts jobs, and he
Yes.
had no idea. So many associations on their website or in their LinkedIn or on their groups or their Slack channel, they
Yep.
post jobs there. So those are often jobs that aren't getting posted anywhere else.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and, like, the other thing is just, like, you had, touched on this, just, like, different groups, like, if you're a woman, like, a woman in revenue, woman in customer success, there's all these niche groups. You made me think of one, they have a Slack channel, I think it's Women in Sales, and they will post jobs in different cities, so these are things that you're not finding out there, you have to almost dig in or get these type of referrals to figure out, like, where are these other places I can look for jobs.
It's one of my favorite questions I have people ask when they're networking is what are the associations you belong to? Like what are the groups that you belong to? Where do you show up? You know,
Yep.
um, anyone under 40 is the
Mhm.
Young Professionals
Yep.
Associations out there. There are great ones. Yes, are there going to be some in some cities that maybe don't do anything exciting, but what a great way to meet people and get involved and to find the folks who are going to say, "Allison, give me your resume because I have an opportunity."
Exactly, exactly. And the chambers of commerce too as well is,
Mhm.
that was an area that I honestly wasn't familiar with until I, started my own journey, and now I meet all of these people who are like, "Hey, I'm looking for someone for this new role," and I'm like, "This is," and they have a young professional group too as well, but it's just this is another untapped area too that people may not know about.
Absolutely. Okay, so folks get out there, they're starting to apply. And I think the other piece you talked about was letting people know that you're
Mhm.
looking. Um, I think to me there's kind of those two groups. There's the
Yep.
let me let all of my I think of this about my Facebook versus my LinkedIn, right?
Yep.
On Facebook, feel free to go drop it out there to the world. I'm looking for a job. Now, if you're currently full-time employed and you don't want your employer to know this,
Yes.
Be careful about where you're posting things.
Correct.
Um, right? Depending on your company, I've seen, particularly if you're in a, quote, toxic work environment or you have a terrible boss, I've seen people get pushed out really quickly when somebody knows that they're looking. So, cautionary tale there. But let all of the people who you are close to in your, what I like, right, I would consider my Facebook circle, my friends, those people. Now on LinkedIn, you can also start to reach out to people and say things like, "Hey, I'm thinking about looking for a new job. Could I use you for a reference?"
Yes.
It's a great way to reconnect with people.
And
Um,
people wanna hear from you too.
yes.
I think when you're on the other side, you're worried that they won't. I've had, a lot of my previous people that I've worked with reach out to me and ask for a reference. I'm always willing to, and I'm happy to hear from them, like, "What are you up to?" So I think don't be worried that they'll don't wanna hear from you. I think most of the time they do.
Absolutely. And then on the other side, I tell people to reach out to strangers all the time to ask them about their jobs. Don't reach out to a stranger. Like if you don't know Allison, do not be sending her an email that says, "Can you help me get a job?" or "Here's my resume. I'm looking for a job." Send her a resume message that says, "Wow, what you do is really interesting. I'd love to talk to you about what you do."
Yep,
Gather information because the more that people know you, the more likely they're going to turn around and say, "Hey, here's what I'm doing." Like, "Oh, wait, we have a role. Would you be interested?"
exactly.
Um, so, okay, people get through that and then they interview.
Yeah.
So, what are some of your interview tips at this moment in time? Because I feel like my interview tips change.
Yeah.
Like every couple of years, I'm like, "Oh, wait, no, here's a whole new way to do it."
Yeah.
So, thinking about like preparing for an interview,
Yep.
showing up, interviewing, follow
Mhm.
up, like that whole interview trajectory, what are some of the kind of do's and what are some of the don'ts? Like I think anybody who's ever interviewed people regularly has some really good horror stories of like the worst interviews ever. So,
Yeah, so what I typically tell clients when they're interviewing, the number one thing is you do need to practice. And what I will say is start to have those common questions that are going to be asked. And you either know from interviewing before, they're going to ask about your background. You are going to want to know, like, what are some of your successes in these roles? What are some things that were challenging? How did you deal with a difficult customer or client? Things like that. There's very common questions, but if you can start to understand your like wins, your losses or challenges, and have those stories ready and that they sound like you're in a conversation versus reading from them, that's really important. The one that I think trips up a lot of people is tell me about yourself. It seems like such a simple question, but what people will tend to do, and guess what? I've been guilty of this in the past too. So I've learned the right way is you start listing everything on your resume. So they have your resume. They don't want to know that. This is actually the best time for you to tailor your experience to the person you're talking to. So if you're looking for a specific role, you can tell them about your wins that you've had and why you're a great fit for this job. You're starting off the interview really strong. They'll ask follow-up questions if they need it, and let it only be 90 seconds to like maybe 2 minutes. You don't want it to be going on for 5 minutes because that's where you're going to start to lose people. Are going to be like, all right, she's not concise. If I have her in a meeting, she's just going to be very long-winded potentially. So you really need to have that like strong first impression. So it's really that like practicing and having your answers ready.
I agree. The "tell me about yourself." I've had clients go and then come back to me and be like, "Nobody's ever asked me that." And I was like, "No, they may not have said the words, 'Tell me about
Yeah.
yourself,' but whatever their opening question is, that's what they're talking about." One of my favorite ways to answer that has been saying something along the lines of like, "I've always," or "The thread that's gone through my career is," and talk about your career from a high level
Hmm.
because like you said, we know many people who've done this wrong. I've actually sat in on interviews where people have said things like, "Well, I was born in New York, and then after high school, I went to college." And you're like, you know, 20 minutes later, you're like falling asleep at the wheel because they literally have told you their entire life story. It's like nobody wants to hear that.
I
Nobody
had
needs that.
I had a client recently come back to me and she goes, "The recruiter said, thank you. You answered that question correctly with that." And I started laughing when she told me. I was like, I know, but you had to practice it, right? To get it there. So I agree with you. You don't want those long-winded life history. So
No, and I always tell folks too when they ask, "Tell me about yourself," or like whatever that opening question
yeah,
is, they are literally what they're getting at is not really "Tell me about yourself." They don't care. What
yeah,
they want to know is, "Tell me how you are going to fit into our company." Now, if you've done something wildly interesting in life, I had a client who um, spent 6 months in Antarctica
nice.
in a research project.
Yeah,
I was like, "That is super interesting."
yeah.
So, you could even start with, like, "Tell me about yourself," and you can even though it was 15 years ago, you can start and say, I spent 6 months in Antarctica, and a few things I learned there that I've carried throughout my whole career." Something like that. But again, something that shows interest, like, yeah, her job is never going to be what she did in Antarctica. It's nothing she wants to do. It was a really cool experience she got to have. It tells them a little bit about her, but again, she doesn't need to tell the whole story. You can drop some of those pieces that all of a sudden people are like, "Whoa, wait a second. Wait, you were in Antarctica?" and bring it around.
And that also makes her a little bit more memorable, to be honest.
Right.
Like, I could see, like, later if I was a interviewer being like, "Remember the person from Antarctica?" Like, almost
Yes.
to the person that way, not
Yeah,
in a bad way, but that's kinda the thing I may remember.
absolutely. Okay, so they get through the interview. The other piece, I think from a prep standpoint, particularly for folks going for these higher level jobs,
Yeah.
executive level jobs,
Mhm.
when you get into so I always think that first interview, particularly if it's a recruiter, it's like a checkbox, right? They're just trying to make sure they're just going through and being like, does Allison meet all the qualifications? Is she even worth me telling the manager about?
Yep.
Then you meet with the manager. They're trying to figure out, would you fit into with our team? Usually for higher level positions, your last interview is going to be with C suite level or senior VP level. And at this point, they don't need to know about your basic skills.
Mhm.
They wanna know you from a strategic thinking standpoint. And to me, the advice that I give clients all the time here is one that you need to really understand the company at this point. At this point, it's not about you. They're seeing if you fit in. So if you can go into that interview and really talk about the company and all of the company pieces, making it less about you, you are more likely to get that job. Because the person who goes in and is talking about the sales that they made 15 years ago, the C-suite level people, senior people are just snoozing through that. So,
Exactly.
really do your research on the companies. I think a lot of folks do spend time practicing their interview
Mhm.
questions, but what they don't do is spend those extra hours really
Yep.
researching the company.
And I 100% agree, and I think the other thing too, that I'll tell clients to do, and this is when LinkedIn comes in, where I think it's really valuable, look at the person you're gonna be interviewing with.
Oh,
So
yes.
depending if you're interviewing with a chief revenue officer versus a chief operating officer, they actually want you to say different things, right? So the chief revenue officer wants to say, how are you going to grow this revenue? To Colleen's point, when you come in, the chief operation officer is like, how are you going to keep these operations going well when you come in? So it's like you can tailor your answers to them. And I think that's important to know who you're interviewing with and what's important to him or her, because you want to talk to their problems at their company.
100%. The other more recent thing I've started telling folks is to go listen to internal podcasts.
Yes.
So many companies on their website will have podcasts that really are meant for internal. They put them out there hoping, one or two people
Yeah.
might listen to them, but they're really set up to be like, hey, know our people.
Mhm.
Go back and look. The
Yeah.
other one is if you search on Spotify or Apple, you can search for somebody's name to see if they've been on other podcasts. So they may not have been on the, Career Wave Consulting
Yeah.
podcast, but they may have been on somebody else's podcast. So if you search for their name, you'll be able to see, and then you can drop it and say, oh, I listened to the podcast when you were on the, Great
Mhm.
Leaders of America podcast. And when you talked about blah, 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 it really resonated with me.
Yeah.
right?
Yep,
Makes a big difference.
I've found some of that stuff too as well because, people like what they're posting on LinkedIn, sometimes that will have there, and it will give you a feel for the person too. So I think that's amazing advice too, to do the searching and everything.
Okay, so last thing before we kind of start to wrap up. What give me one of your interview like what are your craziest interview stories through the years, right? As somebody who's interviewed a lot of people, like what are
Yep.
some of the ones that still to this day you're like, "Let me tell you about the time."
Yeah. So I was interviewing someone for it was a strategic account manager job. So this person would be on the road going out to different hospitals throughout the US. I kid you not, it was a Zoom call. He called me from a bar. So you could see all of the bottles behind, right? Like, so if you're seeing me now, is all behind me. And I was a little taken aback for a moment. I was like, wait, what is happening? And he's like, I couldn't find anywhere that had internet. So I thought, I went to the golf club. I think this would be a really good place for an interview. And I was just like, wait, what? I did conduct the interview with him because, he did get on and stuff, but I was like, this is not gonna work, right? Like, it is important to, recognize where you're gonna be. Also, blurred backgrounds do help too, for
Yes.
it. So, or, different things. But I think that was the one that was really shocking to me, that was in the past few years.
I had one and this was decades ago. So it was before we used video conferencing. We had somebody who we were interviewing over the phone and we were, I don't know, 5 minutes into the interview, so it was a phone. She lived in DC, um, and we she had disclosed to us that she was blind and had a service dog and said, "It might be tricky for me to get up there for the first interview. Could I do round 1 via phone?" And we're like, "Absolutely,
Yeah.
sure." Like, that makes total sense. If we make it to the final round, we'll fly you up for that. Great. We're a couple of minutes in, and all of a sudden we hear her yell, "Don't open the door. No, 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 don't come in." And waiting for her to say, "I'm on an interview," instead she yells, "I'm naked."
Oh my goodness.
And then she comes back and all of a sudden she goes, "Oh, I didn't hit mute correctly, did I?" We're like, "No, nope. Nope, you didn't." She's like, "Sorry, my house cleaner came." And then she doesn't even cover it up by saying, "I was just like trying to think of like the thing that would keep her out
Yeah,
of the room." Nope. She's like, "I didn't have time to get dressed, so I'm doing the interview naked and I didn't want her to come in." And we were like, "Okay, so now you've said naked twice on an interview."
oh, good thing it was not a Zoom call.
Thank God it
Yeah,
wasn't a Zoom call. Hopefully, she would have known better, but I
yeah,
remember thinking, "Oh, okay." No, she didn't get it. The other one, which I think for clients, I actually talk about this case many times. I worked with a woman, again, this was decades ago, who was a high-end, um, executive assistant, and I couldn't understand why she wasn't getting a job, right?
yeah,
She had all the skills, we had put her through all of the like all of the testing and stuff. Like she knew all of the things. And her resume was great. She was getting interviews and she was never getting it. And I kept thinking maybe she's super nervous.
mhm,
So finally, for an interview, I said, let's meet for coffee right beforehand. I'll walk you to the interview. Like maybe she just like anxiety took over.
yeah.
And so we met and she sat like she was at the coffee shop first, so then she puts her coat on as we walk out. She has a giant and when I say giant, for those of you who can't see, we're talking like dessert plate kind of size, right? Like at least 6 or 8 inches across button that said abortion kills and had a picture of a fetus, dead fetus on it. And I was like, "Huh." And she's like, "Oh, I'm very like anti-abortion." I'm like, I don't care what your views are on anything. And I said, "Do you wear that coat when you are going?" Because it was winter, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, like, this is my only coat." I'm like, "That's why you're not getting a job." I'm like, "'Cause I don't care what it is you're passionate about, that button could have said, 'I love the color purple,'
Exactly.
and it wouldn't have mattered either." But I said, people are seeing that and thinking that you're a fanatic about something,
Mhm.
and nobody wants to work with you.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to work with you.
It's that first impression.
Mhm. 'Cause the person who took your coat, I guarantee, went to whoever interviewed you and said, "Oh my god, let me tell you what's on this person's coat."
Yep.
And that's why you're not getting a job. So she took the button off, and lo and behold, she got the job that day. 'Cause I knew she had the skills, like, right? I
Mhm.
was so shocked, and
It
she
had to be, something else, right? Something else was influencing it.
so if you are thinking that, think twice about what you are wearing that isn't necessarily your clothes, and the fact that you have a coat, right? That interview starts the minute you step on the property. Because if you're mean or obnoxious to the person who's in charge of parking, if you are mean to the security person, if you're mean or obnoxious to the receptionist, they are 100% telling the person who interviewed you not to hire you.
Yep. Because
So,
it's all about, can you work at this organization? And you're gonna
mhm,
interact with all of those people.
100%. All right, Allison, any last tips? You got any like one last tip for the people before we jump into
Yeah.
our rapid fire?
I think, like, when you're looking for jobs, I think really the most important thing, and I'd mentioned this at the beginning, it really is telling people that you're looking for a job. And then I'll add on, and just having a goal. Even if the goal moves, having a goal to say, I'm going to apply to this many jobs, or I'm going to talk to this many people, that's just going to help you stay on track for it. It does take a while, but I do think that having, talking to people and having a short term goal will be helpful to move it forward.
100%. All right, so now let's move into our fun rapid fire questions. All right, it is summertime. So what are you bringing to the barbecue?
I am probably bringing potato salad.
Nice. All right. What are you binging or streaming on TV these days? And we'll put the caveat here that we know you have two young children.
Yes.
So,
So I was watching Sullivan's Crossing on
mhm.
Netflix. The season number 4 just came out, and for some reason, I really like the Canadian vibe with it. So I've been watching that recently.
Yeah, it's pretty much the Canadian version of Virgin River for those
Yes.
who by the same producer. And if you've watched Virgin River, I can't get that out today. You will notice the plot lines are very similar, but it is light. It is not stressful. I've enjoyed that as well. All right. Are you an inbox zero or a total chaos inbox person?
Oh, inbox zero. Anytime it's over, I get very stressed.
All right. And our last one that we always ask folks is what book recommendations do you have for people? Like what would you, either fiction or nonfiction, like what is the thing that you think people should be reading these days?
Yeah, so I have one nonfiction, and if time, I'll give you the fiction one too. But
Absolutely.
this book, I really liked. It's called All the Cool Girls Get Fired, and it's by Laura Brown and Kristen O'Neill. So I read this probably about 6 months ago. I loved it because it gave really practical advice about people that had lost their professions, whether layoff or being fired. My favorite chapter was, you need to fire yourself. So sometimes jobs, it's time for you to go, and sometimes you have to tell yourself to go. So I really like that one. So definitely pick that up. I listened to it on audio. It was really good.
Oh, I
And
love
then
that. I have not read that. I will have to look for that. Maybe we'll try
yeah.
to get them on our podcast because that sounds like a great topic.
Oh, yeah, it's wonderful. I definitely recommend. And then my fiction one that I just read, which interestingly, it does have like work threads in it, but it's Whistler by Anne Patchett. So it's one of her newer books. It talks more about family reconciling after a car accident, but it's interesting because there's threads about people retiring, people not wanting to retire in their work life, and how it like bleeds into their family. So it was interesting to have that like thread, but that one's a newer one that just recently came out. It has a horse on the cover if anyone's looking for it.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. And so, if our folks today are listening and they thought, oh, I really need some career help, how do they find you? Like, where can they
Yeah.
find you? And we'll link all of this in the show notes for folks too.
Great. Yeah, so you can always go to my website. So it's careerwavecoaching.com. I also am on Instagram at Career Wave Coaching. I'm also on TikTok at Career Wave Coaching. I give some advice there. So if you want some short advice, you can go there too as well. But Colleen, I just really want to thank you for having me on today. It was great to talk about, the hiring process.
Well, thanks for coming on today, Allison. And for all of you listening, we hope you get to squiggle into something great this week.